Diversity of classical literary genres in history. Throughout history, literature has taken many different forms, reflecting the diversity and complexity of human experience. From epic poetry to drama to the novel, classic literary genres have evolved over time, each with its own distinctive characteristics and conventions. In this article, we will explore the diversity of classic literary genres in history, and how they have contributed to our understanding of the human experience. One of the oldest and most enduring literary genres is epic poetry. Epic poetry tells the stories of heroic figures and their adventures, often with a focus on themes of honor, glory, and heroism. Examples of epic poetry include the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, as well as the Aeneid by Virgil. These works are notable for their grandeur and scope, as well as their emphasis on the heroic ideals of ancient Greek and Roman culture. Another classic literary genre is drama, which emerged in ancient Greece and has been a staple of Western literature ever since. Drama typically involves the portrayal of characters in conflict, often in the context of a larger social or political issue. Examples of classic drama include the plays of Sophocles, Euripides, and Shakespeare. Drama is notable for its emphasis on dialogue and action, as well as its ability to explore complex social and political issues through the lens of individual characters and their struggles. In addition to epic poetry and drama, another classic literary genre is the novel. The novel emerged in the 18th century as a new form of literature, characterized by its emphasis on character development, plot, and narrative structure. Examples of classic novels include Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, and War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. The novel is notable for its ability to capture the nuances and complexities of human experience, as well as its ability to explore a wide range of social and political issues. Yet another classic literary genre is the essay. The essay is a form of nonfiction writing that typically explores a specific topic or theme in depth, often from a personal perspective. Examples of classic essays include On the Duty of Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau, Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. Essays are notable for their ability to explore complex issues in a concise and engaging manner, and for their ability to express personal viewpoints and perspectives. In addition to these classic literary genres, there are also a number of other forms of literature that have emerged over time, each with its own distinctive characteristics and conventions. For example, the short story is a form of literature that emerged in the 19th century, characterized by its brevity and focus on a single incident or character. Examples of classic short stories include The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Another form of literature that has become increasingly popular in recent years is the graphic novel. A graphic novel is a form of literature that combines text and visual elements, often in the form of a comic book or graphic narrative. Examples of classic graphic novels include Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Graphic novels are notable for their ability to combine visual and textual elements to create a unique and engaging reading experience. In conclusion, the diversity of classic literary genres in history is a testament to the richness and complexity of human experience. From epic poetry to drama to the novel, Each genre has its own unique characteristics and conventions, and has contributed to our understanding of the human condition in different ways. Whether exploring themes of heroism and honor, social and political issues, or the nuances of personal experience, classic literary genres continue to provide a window into the human experience, and to inspire and engage readers of all ages and backgrounds. Literature has always provided expressions of the human experience in many forms and genres. From epic poems to plays to novels, different literary styles have emerged to express different perspectives, themes, and ideas. Looking back at classics of world literature reveals the rich diversity of genres that have developed and evolved over history. One of the earliest and most enduring genres is epic poetry, exemplified by works like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey from ancient Greece and Virgil's Aeneid from Rome. Epics traditionally recount the deeds and adventures of heroes, rooted in oral tradition and framed within a cultural and historical context. Epics often exhibit a grander scale by invoking the supernatural and exploring the conflict between human and divine forces. Epics highlight themes of courage, wisdom, destiny, and the virtues and flaws of humanity. Tragedy is another venerable genre that originated in ancient Greece with playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Tragedies follow the downfall of a heroic or noble figure, usually resulting from a tragic flaw or fate-driven circumstances beyond their control. Tragedies explore profound questions of morality, justice, and the suffering inherent in the human condition. Though sorrowful, tragedies are meant to arouse feelings of pity and fear that purge the audience's emotions. The structure, themes, and techniques of Greek tragedy had an enduring influence on world literature. Comedy emerged as another major genre in ancient Greece, exemplified by the works of Aristotle and playwrights like Menander. In contrast to tragedy, comedies typically have happy endings and focus on everyday rather than elevated themes. The plots of comedies often involve mistaken identities, deceptions, and disguises that are eventually resolved. While comedy continues to entertain, many classic comedies offer social and political commentary on human folly and vices through satire, parody, and irony. In later eras, lyric poetry developed as a genre focused on intense personal feeling rather than narrative. Lyric poems express the poet's most intimate thoughts and emotions, centered around themes of love, beauty, nature, and the fleetingness of life. The poems are often short and structured around musical patterns. The intricate and imagistic language of lyric poetry allows readers to vicariously experience profound beauty and truth. The genre of novels also emerged later in history, although the roots of storytelling reach back to oral tradition. Novels use prose and extended narrative to explore the complexities of human psychology, behavior, and social circumstances. The psychological realism, detailed settings, and broad cast of characters in classic novels like Cervantes' Don Quixote, Austen's Pride and Prejudice, or Dickens' David Copperfield contributes to readers' understanding of the human condition across different times and places. In total, these classic literary genres, and many others that have evolved over time, demonstrate how different forms emerge to express the manifold ways that human beings interpret the world, make sense of experience, and convey beauty, truth, and meaning through language and imagination. The rich variety of genres suggests just how inexhaustible literature remains as an artistic endeavor, constantly discovering new forms that reflect and illuminate the ever-changing human experience. Throughout history, literature has been a means of expressing ideas and emotions, documenting events, and exploring the human experience. As such, it has evolved into a multitude of genres, each with its own unique characteristics and purposes. The elements that make up the beauty and classics of Chinese literature in the modern era and their influence on Chinese and world culture and life. Chinese literature has a long and rich history, spanning thousands of years and encompassing a wide range of genres and styles. From ancient poetry and prose to modern novels and plays, Chinese literature has captivated readers around the world with its beauty, complexity, and timeless themes. In this article, we will explore the elements that make up the beauty and classics of Chinese literature in the modern era, and their influence on Chinese culture and life in the world. One of the key elements that make up the beauty and classics of Chinese literature is its emphasis on nature and the natural world. Nature has long been a central theme in Chinese literature, with poets and writers using the natural world to explore themes such as beauty, harmony, and the passage of time. The classical Chinese poets, such as Li Bai and Du Fu, often wrote about the beauty of mountains, rivers, and flowers, using vivid imagery and metaphors to capture the essence of the natural world. In modern Chinese literature, nature continues to play an important role. With writers such as Mo Yan and Yan Lianke using the natural world to explore themes such as environmentalism, urbanization, and the impact of modernity on traditional ways of life. Another element that contributes to the beauty and classics of Chinese literature is its emphasis on morality and ethics. Chinese literature has long been concerned with questions of right and wrong, justice, and the human condition. The ancient Chinese philosophers, such as Confucius and Lao Tzu, wrote extensively about ethics and morality, and their teachings have had a profound influence on Chinese literature and culture. In modern Chinese literature, writers continue to grapple with questions of morality and ethics, often using their work to critique social and political injustices and to explore the complexities of human nature. The use of language is another key element that contributes to the beauty and classics of Chinese literature. Classical Chinese is a highly expressive and nuanced language, with a rich tradition of poetry and literary prose. Chinese poets and writers have long used language to create vivid images and convey complex emotions and ideas. In modern Chinese literature, writers continue to experiment with language, often using unconventional structures and techniques to create works that are both innovative and deeply moving. The themes of love and romance are also a central element of Chinese literature, with many classic works exploring the complexities of human relationships. The Chinese literary tradition has produced some of the world's greatest love stories, such as The Butterfly Lovers and The Peony Pavilion. In modern Chinese literature, love and romance continue to be a popular theme, with writers using their work to explore contemporary issues such as gender roles, sexuality, and the changing nature of relationships in the modern world. The influence of Chinese literature on Chinese culture and life cannot be overstated. Chinese literature has had a profound impact on Chinese philosophy, religion, and art, shaping the way that people think about themselves and the world around them. Chinese literature has also played an important role in shaping Chinese identity and national consciousness, with many classic works becoming touchstones of Chinese culture and history. In the modern era, Chinese literature continues to influence Chinese culture and life in a number of ways. The popularity of Chinese literature both at home and abroad has helped to promote greater understanding and appreciation of Chinese culture, and has helped to break down cultural barriers between China and the rest of the world. Chinese literature has also played an important role in shaping contemporary Chinese society, with writers using their work to critique social and political injustices and to explore the complexities of modern Chinese life. Beyond China, Chinese literature has also had a significant impact on the world. The influence of Chinese literature can be seen in the works of writers such as Jorge Luis Borges, who was deeply influenced by the Chinese classic The Book of Changes, and in the popularity of Chinese literature in countries such as Japan, Korea, and the United States. Chinese literature has also inspired filmmakers, artists, and musicians around the world, with works such as Dream of the Red Chamber and Journey to the West becoming the basis for countless adaptations and interpretations. In conclusion, Chinese literature is a treasure trove of beauty, complexity, and timeless themes. Its emphasis on nature, morality, and language, as well as its exploration of love and romance, have made it a central element of Chinese culture and life for thousands of years. In the modern era, Chinese literature continues to influence and inspire readers around the world, providing a window into the rich cultural traditions of China and the complexities of the human experience. Chinese literature has a long history stretching back thousands of years, producing many classics that exhibit unique aesthetic qualities and philosophical insights. Several elements contribute to making Chinese literature beautiful and timeless, including its sense of poetic wonder for nature, subtle use of symbolism, integration of Buddhism and Taoist wisdom, and skillful use of literary techniques like allusions and parallelism. These traits continue to shape Chinese culture and influence the world today. One defining feature of Chinese literary classics is their evocative portrayal of nature. Chinese poems and stories capture the beauty, harmony, and metaphysical significance of the natural world through vivid description, metaphor, and allusion. The natural environment serves as a mirror for human character, emotion, and wisdom. Works like Tao Yuanming's Peach Blossom Spring, Li Bei's Climbing the Tower Alone at Night, and Han Shan's Cold Mountain poems infuse nature with spiritual symbolism to convey philosophical and aesthetic truths. This profound Chinese appreciation for nature's aesthetic and wisdom-granting qualities profoundly influenced Chinese painting, gardening, and life philosophies. Chinese literature also exhibits symbolic subtlety and suggestion rather than explicit declaration. Symbolic objects like pines, orchids, peaches, and bamboo denote deeper meanings related to virtues, personality traits, and the Tao. Allusions to mythical creatures and historical events carry layers of implied spiritual and moral resonance. This penchant for subtle symbolism aligns with the Taoist idea that the fullness of reality transcends what can be directly expressed. Chinese writers favor evoking a dynamic, non-objective realm of experience rather than absolute truth. This insight that reality is indirect, indefinite yet profound continues to define Chinese artistic sensibility, valuing suggested meanings over direct statement. Integration of Buddhist and Taoist wisdom also characterizes Chinese classics. Stories, Poems and parables illustrate insights from these philosophical traditions, seeking to reconcile human desire and reality through mystical or contemplative visions. They depict the spiritual liberation that comes from non-possessiveness, simplicity of life, and emptying the self. Wisdom teachings on impermanence, emptiness, and the illusory nature of selfhood instill literary works with religious contemplative depth. The interweaving of philosophical and mystical insight continues to influence Chinese conceptions of wisdom and spiritual perfection that value being over doing and simplicity over complication. The elements that make up the excellence and classics of Chinese literature and their influence on Chinese and world culture and life. Chinese literature is one of the oldest and richest literary traditions in the world. From the earliest works of classical Chinese literature to the modern works of contemporary writers, Chinese literature has been characterized by its beauty, complexity, and profound insights into the human experience. In this article, we will explore the elements that make up the beauty and classics of Chinese literature, and their influence on Chinese culture and life and the world. The poetry of Chinese literature. One of the most distinctive features of Chinese literature is its poetry. Chinese poetry is characterized by its economy of language, its use of imagery and metaphor, and its focus on nature, emotion, and the human experience. Chinese poetry has been a central part of Chinese culture for thousands of years, and has had a profound influence on the development of Chinese art, music, and philosophy. One of the most famous works of Chinese poetry is the Book of Songs, a collection of ancient Chinese poems that date back to the Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 256 BCE. The Book of Songs includes poems that celebrate the beauty of nature, express human emotions, and reflect on the joys and sorrows of life. The poetry of the Book of Songs has had a lasting influence on Chinese culture and life, and continues to be studied and appreciated by scholars and readers around the world. The prose of Chinese literature. In addition to its poetry, Chinese literature is also characterized by its prose. Chinese prose is known for its elegance, its clarity, and its ability to convey complex ideas and emotions. Chinese prose has been a central part of Chinese culture for centuries, and has had a profound influence on the development of Chinese philosophy, history, and literature. One of the most famous works of Chinese prose is The Dream of the Red Chamber, a novel by Cao Shuiqian that was written in the 18th century. The Dream of the Red Chamber is widely considered to be one of the greatest works of Chinese literature, and is known for its vivid characters, its intricate plot, and its profound insights into the human experience. The novel has had a lasting influence on Chinese culture and life, and continues to be studied and appreciated by scholars and readers around the world. The philosophy of Chinese literature. Another important element of Chinese literature is its philosophy. Chinese philosophy is characterized by its focus on harmony, balance, and the interconnectedness of all things. Chinese philosophy has had a profound influence on Chinese culture and life, and has played a key role in shaping Chinese art, music, and literature. One of the most famous works of Chinese philosophy is the Tao Te Ching, a book by Lao Tzu that was written in the 6th century. The Tao Te Ching is a central text in Taoism, a philosophy that emphasizes the importance of living in harmony with the natural world. The book has had a lasting influence on Chinese culture and life, and continues to be studied and appreciated by scholars and readers around the world. The historical context of Chinese literature. Finally, the historical context of Chinese literature is an important element that contributes to its beauty and classics. Chinese literature has been shaped by the political, social, and cultural forces of its time, and has reflected the changing attitudes and values of Chinese society. One example of the historical context of Chinese literature is The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a historical novel by Luo Guanzhong that was written in the 14th century. The novel tells the story of the Three Kingdoms period, 220 to 280 CE, a time of political turmoil and war in Chinese history. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms reflects the political and social realities of its time, and offers insights into the challenges and complexities of political power and leadership. Conclusion. The beauty and classics of Chinese literature are characterized by their poetry, prose, philosophy, and historical context. Chinese literature has had a profound influence on Chinese culture and life, and continues to be studied and appreciated by scholars and readers around the world. Through their exploration of the human experience, Chinese writers have offered insights into the nature of the world, the meaning of life, and the complexities of human relationships. The beauty and classics of Chinese literature are a testament to the enduring power of literature to inspire, enlighten, and enrich our lives. What makes Chinese literature beautiful and timeless? Chinese literature has produced many classics over thousands of years that remain beautiful and influential today. Several elements contribute to making these works timeless, while also shaping Chinese culture and beyond. One key element is the use of vivid and evocative language. Chinese poets and writers employ imaginative metaphor, vivid descriptions of nature, and multi-layered allusions to paint pictures that transcend the mundane. Even short works like Tang Dynasty poems or song lyrics invoke a lush sensory and emotional landscape through economical but meticulously crafted language. The aesthetics of simplicity and subtlety also value suggestion and implication over direct statement. The restrained yet poignant use of words creates aesthetic experiences that stay with readers for centuries. Another defining element is exploration of the human condition. Many Chinese classics explore profound and universal themes related to the human experience, the meaning of existence, fragility of human life, futility of worldly attachments, redemptive power of love. Works like Dream of the Red Chamber uncover truths about desire, suffering, family and society, while Romance of the Three Kingdoms reveals human motives of ambition, jealousy, loyalty and betrayal. The ability of these classics to illuminate virtues as well as flaws that unite humankind across time and place contributes to their enduring influence. The integration of spiritual and philosophical themes also imbues Chinese literature with depth and gravity. Works are infused with the wisdom of Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, reflecting Chinese metaphysical understandings of the relationship between humanity, nature, and the universe. Concepts like impermanence, detachment from desire, and cultivation of the way within and without appear throughout literature, shaping characters' motivations and journeys. The integration of philosophy enhances Chinese literature with perspectives on the meaning of human life and purpose of endeavor, resonating across religious traditions. The high aesthetic value placed on allusion and metaphor also distinguishes Chinese literature. References to history, philosophy, and other works create layers of meaning and association beyond the immediate. Allusions allow authors to make subtle comparisons, call upon collective cultural knowledge, and invest the mundane with spiritual significance. Metaphors are woven densely into the text, such that landscapes, objects, and events carry metaphorical weight. The encouragement of readers to tease out associations and implications adds depth and stimulation to the reading experience. Finally, Chinese literature influences culture and global readers by modeling philosophical attitudes toward life. Works advocate an acceptance of impermanence and change, valuing humility and spontaneity over ambition and desire. They cultivate an appreciation for simplicity, tranquility, and harmony with nature. Through evoking aesthetic experiences that touch the soul, Chinese classics shape readers' inner lives, cultivating virtues like compassion, wisdom, and equanimity. In turn, these qualities allow individuals to find meaning and truth amid life's inevitable difficulties and uncertainties. In these ways, the beauty and influence of Chinese literature stems from its ability the development of political philosophy through the classics of the world. Political philosophy is the study of the nature of political systems, the principles of government and governance, and the rights and responsibilities of citizens. The development of political philosophy can be traced back to the classical period, where ancient philosophers in different parts of the world explored and debated the nature of political systems and the role of government in society. In this article, we will explore the development of political philosophy through the classics of the world. Classical Greek political philosophy. One of the earliest and most influential traditions of political philosophy is classical Greek political philosophy. Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle explored the nature of justice, the ideal form of government, and the relationship between the individual and the state. Plato, for example, argued that the ideal form of government was a philosopher kingdom, in which rulers were guided by wisdom and virtue. Aristotle, on the other hand, believed that the best form of government was a constitutional government that balanced the interests of the individual and the community. Classical Chinese political philosophy. Another important tradition of political philosophy is classical Chinese political philosophy. Chinese philosophers such as Confucius and Lao Tzu explored the nature of government and governance, and the principles of individual and communal ethics. Confucius, for example, believed that the key to a stable and just society was the cultivation of moral character and the practice of ethical behavior. Lao Tzu, on the other hand, believed in the importance of individual freedom and the idea that the best form of government was one that governed least. Classical Indian political philosophy. Classical Indian political philosophy is another important tradition that explored the nature of government and governance. Indian philosophers such as Kautilya and Buddha explored the principles of governance and the relationship between the individual and the state. Kautilya, for example, believed in the importance of a strong central government that could maintain law and order and protect the interests of the state. Buddha, on the other hand, emphasized the importance of individual liberation and the idea that the best form of government was one that promoted the well-being of all citizens. Classical Islamic political philosophy. Classical Islamic political philosophy is another important tradition that explored the principles of government and governance. Islamic philosophers such as Al-Farabi and Ibn Rushd explored the nature of justice, the role of the state, and the importance of ethical behavior. Al-Farabi, for example, believed in the importance of a just and virtuous ruler who could maintain the well-being of the community. Ibn Rushd, on the other hand, emphasized the importance of individual freedom and the idea that the best form of government was one that respected the rights and freedoms of all citizens. Modern political philosophy. The development of political philosophy continued throughout the modern period, with philosophers such as John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Immanuel Kant exploring the principles of government and governance. Locke, for example, believed in the importance of individual rights and freedoms, and argued that the role of government was to protect these rights and freedoms. Rousseau, on the other hand, believed in the importance of the general will and the idea that the best form of government was one that promoted the common good. Kant, for his part, emphasized the importance of individual autonomy and the idea that the best form of government was one that respected the rights and dignity of all citizens. Conclusion. The development of political philosophy through the classics of the world reflects the diversity and complexity of human thought and experience. From the classical Greek philosophers to the modern political thinkers, political philosophy has explored and debated the nature of political systems, the principles of government and governance, and the rights and responsibilities of citizens. These traditions of political philosophy have contributed to our understanding of the nature of political power, the relationship between the individual and the state, and the principles of justice and ethical behavior. Ultimately, the classics of political philosophy continue to be a vital and enduring part of the global intellectual tradition, and a source of insight and inspiration for scholars and thinkers around the world. The evolution of political thought through the classics. Many of the most influential works of political philosophy originate from the great classics of world literature. From Plato's Republic to Confucius' Analects to Machiavelli's The Prince, these texts shape the development of foundational ideas about government, rule, and the relationship between the individual and society. They established concepts and arguments that continue to resonate today. One of the earliest and most enduring classics is Plato's Republic, written in ancient Greece in the 4th century BC. The Republic explores questions of justice, the role of knowledge in leadership, and the ideal form of government. Plato advocates a philosopher-king who rules according to reason and universal principles rather than self-interest. The Republic introduces Plato's theory of forms and the allegory of the cave, which frame human experience and knowledge in relation to abstract ideas. Its concepts have deeply influenced Western political philosophy. Aristotle's Politics, written in the same era, responded to Plato's idealism with a more pragmatic approach. Aristotle argued political communities arise from human nature, with the purpose of allowing citizens to live well. He saw different forms of government as capable of fulfilling this purpose to varying degrees depending on citizens' character. Aristotle's concept of the golden mean, avoiding extremes in pursuit of the best course of action, echoes throughout his work. Both Plato and Aristotle foregrounded reason and a concern for the common good as the basis of legitimate government. Confucius' Analects from ancient China also emphasized the moral foundation of political life. Confucius aimed to revive traditional rituals, virtues, and social hierarchies that he saw as the basis for a harmonious society. For Confucius, a junzi or noble man ruled not through legal codes but by personal example and cultivation of benevolence. This emphasis on self-cultivation and moral education set the tone for much of Chinese political thought going forward. Similarly, the Indian epics Ramayana and Mahabharata incorporated political philosophy into discussions of dharma or righteous duty within a social order. The Enlightenment saw classical political ideas challenged and updated. Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan argued governments arose from a social contract meant to protect individuals from a state of nature marked by insecurity and chaos. Jean-Jacques Rousseau similarly framed government as originating from a pact among free and equal individuals. Both introduced concepts of individual rights, consent of the governed, and popular sovereignty that would shape the democratic revolutions to come. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations pioneered the ideologies of free trade and laissez-faire capitalism that define modern economies. More recently, theorists have critiqued classical texts for implicitly upholding unjust hierarchies, patriarchy, and exclusion. Post-colonial theorists argue political philosophies like those of Plato, Aristotle, and Hobbes reflect the domination of colonizing European countries. Feminist political philosophers reinterpret classical works to highlight how concepts of citizenship, human nature, and the public/private distinction have marginalized women. The development of classical poetry through Deepen. Vietnamese poetry has a long and rich history, dating back over 1,000 years. Deepen, or Poetry Classic, is a classical Vietnamese poetry collection that played an important role in shaping and developing the poetic tradition. Compiled in the 13th century, Deepen reflects the evolution of poetry from oral folk songs to more structured forms that incorporated Chinese literary influences. Its inclusion of diverse types of poems illustrate key phases in Vietnam's poetic evolution. Early poems in Deepen consist of rural folk songs and anonymous communal verses that tell of daily village life, natural landscapes, and folktales. Poems like Zone capture the imagination of commoners through simple imagery, rustic language, and references to local customs and beliefs. These folk verses reflect an oral poetic tradition rooted in Vietnam's agrarian culture and animist spirituality before Chinese cultural influences. They showcase the evocative power of poetry drawn from lived experiences close to the earth. Later poems in Deepen move toward structured forms modeled after Chinese poetry, using confined syllabic schemes and allusions to Confucian doctrines. Poets begin to explore more elevated philosophical and political themes instead of rural life. Figures like Tran the Tay demonstrate a mastery of poetic language with refined images and metaphors, though their works remain grounded in Vietnamese sensibilities. This fusion of Chinese forms with indigenous Vietnamese content represents a transitional phase as poetic rigid schematics were imposed on flexible folk verse. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Vietnamese poetry had fully developed distinct formal poetic genres like Luong, Song Luong, and Luc. Poets like Nguyen Binh Kiem exhibit a mature style incorporating lucid images, balanced word placement, and modulated tone. Their works balance Chinese poetic structures and allusions with uniquely Vietnamese emotional expressions, rooted in compassion, concern for the common people, and love of the homeland. Philosophy and politics are conveyed through refined poetic aesthetics that bring readers nearer to truth and reality. Overall, Deepen reflects the evolution of Vietnamese poetry from folk songs to formal verse while preserving elements of simplicity, expressiveness, and authenticity. Early anonymous communal poems established a foundation that later poets built upon. While absorbing cultural influences from China, Vietnamese poets transformed rigid forms to capture distinctly Vietnamese sentiments of place, spirituality, and social realities. Later works demonstrate poetry's ability to illuminate philosophical ideals and political visions through majestic language that resonates with readers on emotional and spiritual levels. In this way, deepen embodies how classical poetry develops through organic assimilation and creative transformation of inherited forms to reflect each nation's unique cultural identity and expressive needs. The collection thus played an important role in shaping Vietnam's poetic voice while connecting Vietnamese literature to broader global poetic traditions. In summary, deepen illustrates how Vietnamese poetry developed from the simplistic folk verse to structured formal genres that incorporated Chinese literary influences while retaining Vietnamese cultural sensibilities. The fusion of authentic emotional expression with Asian poetic forms enabled Vietnamese poetry to evolve into a sophisticated art form that uniquely captured the Vietnamese soul and spirit. Classical poetry is one of the oldest and richest literary traditions in the world, with a history spanning thousands of years. In Vietnam, classical poetry has been a prominent part of the country's cultural heritage for centuries. One of the most important works in the development of classical poetry in Vietnam is deepen, a collection of poems that dates back to the 14th century. In this article, we will explore the development of classical poetry through deepen and its enduring influence on Vietnamese literature and culture. The origins of deepen. Deepen is a collection of poems that was compiled during the Tran dynasty in the 14th century. The collection includes poems from a variety of sources, including popular songs, folk tales, and Buddhist texts. The poems are written in a variety of styles and forms, including free verse, rhymed verse, and prose poetry. The collection is celebrated for its beauty, elegance, and depth, and has had a profound influence on Vietnamese literature and culture. The development of classical poetry through deepen. Deepen was not the first collection of poetry in Vietnam, but it was one of the most important in the development of classical poetry. Prior to the compilation of deepen, poetry in Vietnam was primarily composed in the Chinese language and followed the conventions of Chinese poetry. However, deepen marked a shift towards the development of a distinctively Vietnamese poetic tradition. One of the most significant features of deepen is its use of the Vietnamese language. Prior to the compilation of deepen, Vietnamese poetry was primarily written in Chinese, and the use of the Vietnamese language was relatively rare. However, deepen marked a shift towards the use of the Vietnamese language in poetry, and paved the way for the development of a distinctively Vietnamese poetic tradition. Another significant feature of deepen is its incorporation of folktales and popular songs into poetry. Prior to the compilation of deepen, poetry in Vietnam was primarily composed by scholars and poets in the royal court, and tended to be formal and highly stylized. However, deepen incorporated popular songs and folktales into poetry, making it more accessible to a wider audience and giving it a more natural, spontaneous feel. Finally, deepen marked a shift towards the development of a distinctively Vietnamese poetic form. Prior to the compilation of deepen, Vietnamese poetry followed the conventions of Chinese poetry, with strict rules regarding meter, rhyme, and tonal patterns. However, deepen introduced a more flexible and improvisational style of poetry, with poets free to experiment with different forms and styles. The influence of deepen on Vietnamese literature and culture. Deepen has had a profound influence on Vietnamese literature and culture. The collection has inspired generations of Vietnamese poets and writers, and has helped to shape the course of Vietnamese literature and culture. One of the most significant ways in which deepen has influenced Vietnamese literature and culture is through its celebration of the Vietnamese language. By using the Vietnamese language in poetry, deepen helped to establish the importance of the Language in Vietnamese culture paved the way for the development of a distinctively Vietnamese literary tradition. Another way in which Teen has influenced Vietnamese literature and culture is through its incorporation of popular songs and folktales into poetry. Teen helped to break down the barriers between high and low culture, making poetry more accessible to a wider audience and helping to promote a more inclusive and democratic literary culture. Finally, Teen has influenced Vietnamese literature and culture through its emphasis on improvisation and experimentation in poetry. By breaking away from the strict rules and conventions of Chinese poetry, Teen encouraged Vietnamese poets to explore new forms and styles and to create a distinctively Vietnamese poetic tradition. Conclusion. In conclusion, Teen is a collection of poems that has had a profound influence on the development of classical poetry in Vietnam. The collection marked a shift towards the use of the Vietnamese language in poetry, the incorporation of popular songs and folktales into poetry, and the development of a distinctively Vietnamese poetic form. Comparison between the Tale of the Haika and the Song of Roland from France. The Tale of the Haika and the Song of Roland are two of the most famous epic poems from Japan and France, respectively. While they were written in different historical and cultural contexts, both poems share many similarities in terms of their themes, style, and structure. In this article, we will explore the similarities and differences between the Tale of the Haika and the Song of Roland. Historical context. The Tale of the Haika is an epic poem that recounts the rise and fall of the Taira clan during the late 12th century in Japan. The Taira clan was one of the most powerful families in Japan at the time, and their conflicts with the rival Minamoto clan led to a series of devastating wars known as the Genpei War. The Tale of the Haika was written in the 13th century, several decades after the events it describes, and was likely intended to preserve the memory of the Taira clan and their defeat. The Song of Roland is an epic poem from medieval France that recounts the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in the Pyrenees in 770 CE. The poem tells the story of Roland, a brave knight and nephew of Charlemagne, who leads the rear guard of the Frankish army as they retreat from Spain. The poem was written in the 11th century, several centuries after the events it describes, and was likely intended to glorify Charlemagne and his knights. Themes. Both the Tale of the Haika and the Song of Roland explore themes of loyalty, honor, and the consequences of betrayal. In both poems, the protagonists are bound by a code of loyalty to their lords and are willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of honor and duty. However, both poems also depict instances of treachery and betrayal, and the consequences of these actions are often tragic. In the Tale of the Haika, the Taira clan is ultimately defeated due to the treachery of one of their own, Kiyomori's grandson, who defects to the Minamoto clan. This act of betrayal leads to the downfall of the Taira clan and the eventual rise of the Minamoto clan. Similarly, in the Song of Roland, the rearguard is betrayed by Gonalone, one of Charlemagne's knights, who arranges for them to be ambushed by the Saracens. The betrayal leads to the death of Roland and many of his comrades and ultimately results in Charlemagne's revenge against the Saracens. Style and structure. Both the Tale of the Haika and the Song of Roland are epic poems that use a similar style and structure. They are both composed in verse and use a series of episodes to tell a larger story. Both poems are also characterized by their use of repetition and the use of a formulaic style that emphasizes the heroic deeds of the protagonists. In both poems, the heroes are depicted as larger-than-life figures who are capable of extraordinary feats of strength and courage. The poems also use a similar structure, in which a series of battles and conflicts are described in detail, building up to a final climactic battle. The climactic battles in both poems are characterized by their intense violence and the heroic sacrifices made by the protagonists. However, there are also significant differences between the two poems. The tale of the Heike is more episodic in nature, with each episode focusing on a different aspect of the conflict. The poem also includes a large number of characters and subplots, making it more complex and difficult to follow than the Song of Roland. The Song of Roland, on the other hand, is more focused on a single protagonist, Roland, and his heroic sacrifices. The poem is also more straightforward in its structure, with a clear narrative arc leading up to the final battle. Conclusion. In conclusion, the tale of the Heike and the Song of Roland are two of the most famous epic poems from Japan and France, respectively. While they were written in different historical and cultural contexts, both poems share many similarities in terms of their themes, style, and structure. Both poems explore themes of loyalty, honor, and the consequences of betrayal, and both use a similar style and structure to tell their stories. However, there are also significant differences between the two poems, such as the episodic nature of the tale of the Heike and the focus on a single protagonist in the Song of Roland. Despite these differences, both poems continue to be celebrated and admired today for their depictions of heroic deeds and the enduring themes they explore. The tale of the Heike and the Song of Roland are two of the most famous epic poems from Japan and France, respectively. While they were written in different historical and cultural contexts, both poems share many similarities in terms of their themes, style, and structure. In this article, we will explore the similarities and differences between the tale of the Heike and the Song of Roland. Historical context. The tale of the Heike is an epic poem that recounts the rise and fall of the Taira clan during the late 12th century in Japan. The Taira clan was one of the most powerful families in Japan at the time, and their conflicts with the rival Minamoto clan led to a series of devastating wars known as the Genpei War. The tale of the Heike was written in the 13th century, several decades after the events it describes, and was likely intended to preserve the memory of the Taira clan and their defeat. The Song of Roland is an epic poem from medieval France that recounts the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in the Pyrenees in 770 CE. The poem tells the story of Roland, a brave knight and nephew of Charlemagne, who leads the rear guard of the Frankish army as they retreat from Spain. The poem was written in the 11th century, several centuries after the events it describes, and was likely intended to glorify Charlemagne and his knights. Themes. Both the tale of the Heike and the Song of Roland explore themes of loyalty, honor, and the consequences of betrayal. In both poems, the protagonists are bound by a code of loyalty to their lords and are willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of honor and duty. However, both poems also depict instances of treachery and betrayal, and the consequences of these actions are often tragic. In the tale of the Heike, the Taira clan is ultimately defeated due to the treachery of one of their own, Kiyomori's grandson, who defects to the Minamoto clan. This act of betrayal leads to the downfall of the Taira clan and the eventual rise of the Minamoto clan. Similarly, in the Song of Roland, the rearguard is betrayed by Gonalone, one of Charlemagne's knights, who arranges for them to be ambushed by the Saracens. The betrayal leads to the death of Roland and many of his comrades and ultimately results in Charlemagne's revenge against the Saracens. Style and structure. Both the tale of the Heike and the Song of Roland are epic poems that use a similar style and structure. They are both composed in verse and use a series of episodes to tell a larger story. Both poems are also characterized by their use of repetition and the use of a formulaic style that emphasizes the heroic deeds of the protagonists. In both poems, the heroes are depicted as larger-than-life figures who are capable of extraordinary feats of strength and courage. The poems also use a similar structure, in which a series of battles and conflicts are described in detail, building up to a final climactic battle. The climactic battles in both poems are characterized by their intense violence and the heroic sacrifices made by the protagonists. However, there are also significant differences between the two poems. The tale of the Heike is more episodic in nature, with each episode focusing on a different aspect of the conflict. The poem also includes a large number of characters and subplots, making it more complex and difficult to follow than the Song of Roland. The Song of Roland, on the other hand, is more focused on a single protagonist, Roland, and his heroic sacrifices. The poem is also more straightforward in its structure, with a clear narrative arc leading up to the final battle. The impact of Japanese literature on Western culture. Japanese literature has had a profound impact on Western culture, influencing writers, filmmakers, and artists around the world. From the classic works of Murasaki Shikibu and Matsuo Basho to the modern works of Haruki Murakami and Yukio Mishima, Japanese literature has captivated readers with its unique themes, styles, and perspectives. In this article, we will explore the impact of Japanese literature on Western culture. One of the key ways in which Japanese literature has influenced Western culture is through the translation of classic works. The most well-known example of this is Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, which is widely regarded as the first novel in the world. The Tale of Genji has been translated into numerous languages and has been studied and appreciated by readers around the world. The novel's exploration of themes such as love, beauty, and the passage of time has resonated with readers across cultures, and has helped to introduce Japanese literature and culture to a global audience. Another classic work that has had a significant impact on Western culture is Matsuo Basho's The Narrow Road to the Deep North. The work, which is a travelogue and haiku collection, has been translated into multiple languages and has inspired writers and poets around the world with its powerful imagery and evocative language. Basho's focus on nature and the natural world has also had a profound impact on Western literature, with many writers drawing inspiration from his work and incorporating nature into their own writing. In addition to classic works, contemporary Japanese literature has also had a significant impact on Western culture. Writers such as Haruki Murakami and Yukio Mishima have become household names in the West, with their works being translated into numerous languages and gaining widespread critical and popular acclaim. Murakami's surreal and dreamlike novels, such as Norwegian Wood and Kafka on the Shore, have captivated readers with their unique blend of magical realism, pop culture, and existential themes. Mishima's works, which often explore themes such as nationalism, sexuality, and the human condition, have also resonated with readers around the world. Japanese literature has also had a significant impact on Western cinema, with many filmmakers drawing inspiration from classic Japanese works. The films of Akira Kurosawa, for example, have been widely celebrated for their epic scope, dynamic action sequences, and exploration of themes such as honor, duty, and morality. Kurosawa's films, such as Seven Samurai and Ran, have been cited as major influences by filmmakers such as George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Quentin Tarantino. Japanese literature has also had an impact on Western visual art, with many artists incorporating Japanese themes and styles into their work. The influence of Japanese art can be seen in the work of artists such as Vincent van Go and Claude Monet, who were inspired by Japanese woodblock prints and incorporated elements of Japanese art into their own paintings. In the contemporary art world, Japanese artists such as Yae Kusama and Takashi Murakami have gained international acclaim for their innovative and boundary-pushing work. Beyond the arts, Japanese literature has also had an impact on Western philosophy, with many Western philosophers drawing inspiration from the works of Japanese thinkers such as D.T. Suzuki and Nishida Kitaro. The focus on mindfulness, meditation, and self-reflection found in Japanese philosophy has resonated with Western thinkers and has helped to shape the way that we think about the human condition. In conclusion, Japanese literature has had a profound impact on Western culture, influencing writers, filmmakers, artists, and thinkers around the world. The translation of classic works such as The Tale of Genji and The Narrow Road to the Deep North has helped to introduce Japanese literature and culture to a global audience. While the works of contemporary writers such as Haruki Murakami and Yukio Mishima have captivated readers with their unique perspectives and styles, Japanese literature has also had an impact on Western cinema, visual art, and philosophy, shaping the way that we think about the world and our place in it. As Japanese literature continues to evolve and innovate, its influence on Western culture is likely to remain strong and enduring. Japanese literature has had a significant impact on Western culture, particularly since the late 19th century. Works across genres, from classic texts like The Tale of Genji to avant-garde novels and modern manga, have influenced Western art, film, fashion, and philosophy. Several Japanese authors, including Nagai Kafu, Kawabata Yasunari, Mishima Yukio, and Murakami Haruki, have attained international prominence, stirring both admiration and imitation from Western readers and creators. Japanese literature's engagement with themes of impermanence, detachment, and the surreal has deeply shaped Western aesthetics and perspectives. Arguably the first Japanese work to make a major impact in the West was The Tale of Genji, an 11th-century classic by Murasaki Shikibu. Authored by a woman courtier, Genji depicted themes of psychological interiority, fluid gender roles, and nature's ephemeral beauty that contrasted starkly with prevailing Western values. The novel influenced 19th-century European authors like Marcel Proust and Virginia Woolf, whose works explored female subjectivity and memory in a Genji-esque manner. Genji radically expanded the Western literary imagination by illustrating an Eastern worldview that valued subtlety, brevity, and detachment over directness and restraint over excess. The 20th century saw increased popularity of modern Japanese literature in the West. Authors like Kawabata conveyed a tragic view of life and detachment from material desire that resonated with post-war existentialism and counterculture movements. His sparse stylistic techniques and focus on silence, space, and essence influenced Western minimalist authors like Ernest Hemingway, who stated, "Kawabata makes almost unbearable beauty." Other avant-garde Japanese writers like Mishima and Abe Kobo's absurd, surreal works foreshadowed magic realism and postmodern fiction by authors like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Salman Rushdie. Modern Japanese writers exposed Westerners to Eastern philosophical notions of impermanence, being over having in life as ephemeral blossoms on the stream. In recent decades, Japanese pop culture exports like anime, manga, and J-pop have deeply influenced youth culture worldwide. Anime films from Hayao Miyazaki and Satoshi Kon utilize sophisticated themes and visual techniques that transform the global animation industry. The stylized graphic storytelling of manga spread widely, altering conventions in Western comics. Figures like Hello Kitty and Pokémon became global icons adopted into Western fashion, toys, and media. The surreal, fantastical nature of modern Japanese pop culture has shaped Western visual aesthetics, imbuing mass media with a playful, childlike wonder that defies pragmatic reasoning. This transcultural infusion of cool Japan into the global mainstream illuminates Japan's enduring cultural soft power. In summary, Japanese literature has played an important role in cultural exchange between Japan and the West. Through its distinctive themes of impermanence, aesthetic minimalism, and psychological interiority, Japanese literature has profoundly shaped Western modernism, postmodernism, and global pop culture. Major Japanese authors have influenced prominent Western writers through their experimentation with forms, attention to nature, and depiction of life's fragmentation. And Japan's fusion of high and low culture through anime, manga, and J-pop has transformed global youth culture and visual media. As Japanese literature and pop culture continue engaging new generations of Western readers and audiences, new synergies emerge that further enrich both cultures through creative cross-pollination. Japanese literature has had a profound impact on Western culture, influencing writers, artists, and thinkers around the world.